on this computer. Okay, recording now. So good afternoon and welcome to the Term 4 Riverina Environmental Educators Network meeting. My name's Ben and I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We're on Wiradjuri country and we're lucky to be on Wiradjuri country. Wiradjuri people have been looking after our local area for thousands of years and are continuing to today. So we acknowledge any Wiradjuri people in this meeting today and respect elders past, present and emerging. And the spirit of this meeting is to continue to look after our country the way that it has been looked after for so long. So a quick agenda. We're going to hear first from Suzie from Australian Parents for Climate Action. And then I will probably throw it open to who wants to go next, whether it's Dennis to talk about his technology that he's using at Track, or Ed to talk about your project, your carbon neutrality at CSU, depending on who wants to go first. And we might just get discussion from anyone at any time. So I think what we're trying to do here is really show enthusiasm for the ideas that are being talked about today. And then hopefully what I'm hoping is teachers who either read the minutes or go back and watch the meeting can really visualize themselves picking up some part of this meeting and doing it at their own school. So without further ado, could I ask Suzie, can you quickly introduce yourself and tell us about Australian Parents for Climate Action?
Sure. Hi, Ben and everybody. Thanks for having me. So my name's Suzie Brown. I'm coming to you from Wagga country down in Victoria. So I'm in a little place called Ocean Grove, which is near Geelong. Although I have to say I'm about to move house in about a week up to New South Wales to join you guys, but in the Central Coast, New South Wales. So I'm the founder and National Director of Australian Parents for Climate Action, and I'll just give you a quick intro about who we are, and then we've got a specific campaign you may or may not have heard of called Solar Our Schools, and I'm going to give you a quick overview because that's obviously very relevant to you guys. So Australian Parents for Climate Action, can I just ask who's heard of us? Who's ever come across our organisation? A few of you, great, that's nice to see. So we've been around for about 2 years and we formed out of the school strike for climate, you know, the first ones a bit over 2 years ago. And I was going along to the first one of those and I saw all these amazing teenagers everywhere, but not so many parents or young, like toddlers, babies and primary school kids. And I felt like, oh, who's representing, you know, the parents and the little ones? And I realized there wasn't any sort of group or way to connect. And also as a parent, as I'm sure, and, you know, as a teacher as well, there is a real challenge, real anxiety about raising children or teaching children in a future where we're having to face the climate crisis. And so there's a huge emotional burden and challenge for parents. And so that's also what our group is for. We help parents support each other to deal with this and also to take action together because, you know, doing something about the issue is the best way to feel a bit better about the whole challenge and the grief of the whole thing. So yeah, we formed out of those strikes and then very quickly grew to a few thousand members. And we've done a number of sort of actions and events, but we're also very much online group because as you imagine, parents can't get out to events and rallies and so forth very easily. So we're really designed around making it accessible for parents to engage with campaigns online. And of course, COVID made that whole thing a lot easier and everything was online. So, yeah, look, maybe I'll tell you now about the Solar Our Schools campaign because that's really relevant for all of you. Has anybody come across that campaign by any chance? Yeah, a couple of you. Awesome. So I've actually got a quick presentation as just a short few slides. So I'll share my screen and hopefully host disabled screen sharing. Can I share my screen, Ben?
I beg your pardon, I muted myself as well. No, I'll definitely enable that. I beg your pardon.
Right.
I'm going to go advanced sharing options. All participants can do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
it seems to be fine now.
okay, cool. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Okay. Is that coming? Can you all see
that's
that?
coming up. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so Solar Our Schools campaign, the aims of it is that we want to, the government, so state and federal governments and we started with the federal government, which is why it mentions it there, but we've now shifted also to the state governments, and we're asking them to fund solar and batteries for all, basically all schools and early childhood centres. So we've got varying levels of solar across schools in Australia, depending on how much support there's been from the state government, but also private schools. So larger private schools tend to just get on with it because the business case for solar is so strong that if you get solar panels on a school or a business or a home, generally the payback period, you make back the money within a few years. And schools have a very good business case for solar. So schools like a large private school have mostly just got on with it because they realise that. But unfortunately, smaller schools and then state schools, it's really hard because unless they get a government grant, they usually don't have the money to do it. And state schools, and I think this is in most, if not all states, are not allowed to go into debt. So certainly in Victoria, they can't finance the solar because they're not allowed to have a debt. So they can't get solar unless they have the money up front, which means having a grant or raising the money. So just as an example, the primary school here where I live, Ocean Grove Primary, they don't have solar. They'd love to get solar. The quote is $100,000 for solar for the whole school's needs to cover their, their full daytime needs. They don't have a cent of that. So we've been looking for grants for quite a while now for them. We've managed to scrape together $20,000 from the state government. But so this is the kind of thing we're looking at. And early childhood centres, so your preschools, your childcare centres, kindergartens, we call them in Victoria, even harder for them, unless it's a big childcare chain with lots of money. Your community preschool is going to really struggle, not only for the money, but also just the resource, the staffing to be able to go and organise. It's quite a process to get solar. So that's where the campaign comes from. So we're asking the government to fund it. These are, public buildings, but they can also provide means-tested grants for the private schools and early childhood centres as well. Okay, so maybe I'll go to the next slide. So the benefits of this are really clear, like it's a win-win-win. So this is Beyond Zero Emissions Million Jobs Plan. They did research showing that if a large school got solar and batteries and was able to trade as a virtual power plant, so trade its excess renewable energy on the grid, they could make $114,000 a year. So that's a large amount of money for a school, and even a small school could save or make $12,700 a year. So you're talking, enough to pay for a teacher or part of a teacher's aide wage. So this is significant. And then in terms of jobs, they calculated around 7,000 jobs in the renewable energy industry if I think it's 42% of schools got solar and batteries in this model. So there are a number of schools that already have solar, of course, but there are still, around about half that don't. But even the schools who did get solar in previous grant programs often only have a really small system. So it's only covering a small part of their overall energy needs. And then, of course, the greenhouse emission savings from replacing all of that coal-fired power with solar is significant. So 1.4 million tonnes of greenhouse gases saved per year, that is. So this is what we're asking for. So federal government investment, but at the moment we also are lobbying the state governments and writing to state education ministers because we want them all to come together at the Education Ministers Council and agree to jointly fund it and the states would generally implement it, but the federal government is, they're trying to stimulate the economy coming out of the COVID shutdown. So this is a huge opportunity to create jobs and provide more educational resources. Okay, so just one case study for you. This is a big one. So this was done properly because they got a massive grant. This is Fyans Park Primary in Geelong. They got a state government grant, which is like a one-off grant, $150,000, and they installed 94 kilowatts. There's a photo of it. And they also put in 2 Tesla Powerwall batteries. So that's awesome that they've been able to also have batteries. And they're saving already 10 to 15,000 a year on their energy bills. And I think that's a conservative estimate. They're not trading their power because that was the other barrier. So aside from wanting solar and batteries for schools, we want the state governments to allow schools to trade their energy as a virtual power plant, which means that if they were allowed to, which currently they're not, they could enter into agreement with a trading company who can trade their excess solar energy with houses in their region who don't have solar. So those houses could buy solar from the school on the weekends and on the school holidays and so on. And the other huge benefit of the virtual power plant is that when you have a huge peak demand need, where it's a very hot day, everyone turns on the air conditioner at once, and there's a spike in demand, this energy system struggles to cope with that. And so the governments of all federal and state are always looking for how to flatten, those spikes. And of course, solar and batteries do that. So you could draw on all of these schools' batteries at that point in time when everyone needs the extra power and share it into the grid. And so this is usually in the evening and on weekends, hot weekends in summer and school summer holidays when schools are closed. So it really makes sense. So that would be possible if they were operating as a virtual power plant. Okay, so what we're doing is we've got an open letter to the Prime Minister, which is on our website, which I invite you to sign. I'll give you the link in a minute. And then we've already, since July, been sharing it throughout schools to the parent and teacher communities, generally asking everyone to sign this open letter. And then we ask people to write to their local member of parliament to ask their support for solar our schools. And then some people are having meetings with local MPs as well to talk to them to ask them to support the campaign. Okay, so if you wanted to volunteer, that's the link there. But this is our website, www.ap4ca.org. And if you go there, you will find Solar Our Schools, and you can sign that open letter. And then we will share with you more info about what more action you can do to support the campaign. Okay, so thank you. Now I was interested, just stop share, there we go. In one more minute, if any of you have any questions, or if you in your school have already got solar, or you don't have solar and you would like to get solar, if anyone would like to share their case study.
No, we haven't got it at an environmental education centre. We've had lots of different run-ins with red tape to do with lots of different energy saving resources, water saving resources. We had to actually get a grant so that we could put water system in our school, so that we had kids out in the field that we weren't having to provide them with water bottles, which obviously, in COVID times aren't going to be reusable and get in the back. So it's just, yeah, we haven't got solar at this stage, but I'm interested.
Yeah, and what kind of school is it? Is it a state school or an independent school?
We're a public school, but we're considered an environmental education centre. So the kids come in every day. We don't have a substantive enrolment that is the same.
Oh, okay. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense for an environmental education centre to have solar.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah,
They've just installed great big units, air conditioning units, which we didn't get a chance to say where they were going into, and they went into an area that we don't use because our classroom is a temporary block. You know, this is
my
what
God.
we deal with.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the New South Wales government just announced a few pilots, actually. They're doing solar batteries and demand management. I don't know how many schools, a small number, but with a view to rolling it out more widely. And then they also have had an air conditioning program, which they say is coupled with solar panels, but I'm not sure how thorough that is. Yeah, that's frustrating that that communication is not better with the department. Can I ask the name of the school?
We're at the Riverina Environmental Education Centre. There's
Okay.
a big muffle.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. Any other case studies, examples from anyone else?
It's probably the only other school here.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Well,
I'll mention something quickly.
yeah.
I'm really interested in how a teacher would incorporate a project like that into the teaching and learning programs at their school. So I'm obviously the numbers speak for themselves, Suzie. They're quite compelling. It sounds like you've just got to get past that initial hurdle for someone to say, yes, let's do it, or find the grant. But once, let's say the school is even operating as one of those virtual power plant, something power plant that you mentioned? I can't remember.
Virtual power plant.
Virtual power plant. It's still really interesting to me with how a teacher could incorporate that aspect of the school's physical structure into their teaching and learning programs. I would find that really, really interesting because if students can feel a sense of pride in their school and what they're doing, it can make their learning more vibrant. The possibilities are really endless. I think whether you're a primary school or a high school, because so solar panels could immediately, I think, be integrated into design and from a high school perspective, mathematics, design and technology, geography, science. There's so many angles.
Yeah.
Ben, sorry. Hi, my name's Kate. Sorry, I've been in and out a bit. Our school doesn't have solar panels, but definitely something that we are dreaming of. It's always in the pipeline. Ben, I could see that as an enormous STEM opportunity in primary schools where students could investigate the benefits of having solar power at school, how much it would save, both environmentally and in terms of economics for the school. And I'm sure there's miniature forms of solar experiments that could be done to, see how this sort of stuff works. But there certainly would be some form of STEM units written on that at a primary level. But at the end of the day, for us in the public system, the amount of money to put these in is just completely out of our reach at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. What school, Kate, are you at?
Oh, I'm at a place called Sturt Public School that's in Wagga.
Oh, yeah, great.
Kate, can I invite you to stay tuned for listening to Dennis's what Dennis does? So Dennis is working with a STEM project at Track at the moment, and he'll fill us in with that later on.
And I might come in here because one of the interesting things that's just been raised is the ability for people to see this information live. So it might be appropriate that I explain what we're doing. A lot of it could be beneficial to some of the discussions that have just taken place.
I know Suzie has to go, Dennis, so sorry, can I just pop in really quickly and just say, so Dennis, you can be next cab off the rank, but Suzie, did you have anything else you wanted to say before you had to shoot off?
Yeah, just very quickly, the last thing I want to mention is there's a group in Wagga, just in case you don't already know, you probably do, but I think it's called Fridays for Future. Yeah. You all know them? Yeah, so they're affiliated with us also. So Emily and Trudy, and they're all absolute legends. So yeah, get involved with them. They know all about this campaign also. Yeah. So that's really great to hear about your examples. And Kate, I was just wondering before I go, we're looking for some case studies of schools that don't have solar and would like it. do you think Sturt Public School would be up for being a case study? As in, sorry, in the media, to talk to a journalist.
That's certainly something we do fairly regularly. It depends on how much that it would entail. So perhaps I could give you my email address.
Yeah, perfect.
And we could talk outside of this arena so that everybody else doesn't have to listen to me carry on because I talk a fair bit.
Do you want to type it in the chat?
Sure.
Great.
Good idea.
And I'll type our open letter into the chat, and you can all hopefully sign it if you haven't. And otherwise, thanks very much for having me.
Thanks,
Thank
Suzie.
you. Thanks, Suzie.
No worries.
Suzie.
Bye.
Dennis, thanks so much. Sorry I interrupted there. Yeah, really happy to throw to you now, Dennis. If you would like to give us, you know, jump in with what you thought was relevant there.
Okay. I think one of the interesting things that we've been working for the last 7 or 8 years nationally with schools, providing live energy monitoring data. And we've always worked with the business managers and the property managers because it was all about how can we save money. So the system that Ben can send you the details of, and we can certainly send you a link to have a look at the live data from Track in Wagga, gives a complete breakdown live of where is the energy going in the buildings, how much air conditioning they're using. We're just about to link their small solar system into this. One of the frustrating things over the last 7 or 8 years was getting the business managers and property managers to share this live data with the teachers. It was almost like there was a division between the administration side of a school and the teaching side of the school. But the advent of STEM really broke down that barrier, and so no longer could they say, no, that's not information we want to share with teachers or with students. So basically, if we send you all a link, because we've spoken to Track, they're happy to do this, you would actually be able to see live the energy use at that school. And it's really quite illuminating to see the amount of energy that schools use, what I call out of hours. So from say midnight to 7 o'clock, and from 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock to midnight, it's staggering how much power is wasted, because who could run around a school every night and check that everything's been switched off? So seeing that live data is really important. So what we wanted to do, which was really driven by our social desire, and it was really stimulated by Greta Thunberg, getting all the students to go on strike and saying that we're not doing anything about climate change, was to say, okay, how can we empower students in schools to not be observers, but to be participants?
So, sorry, Dennis, at this stage, can I just get you to explain who we is? So just explain.
So Optimum Control is an industry-based organisation that provides live energy monitoring systems to industry, but particularly schools. So schools have horrible electricity bills, as you know, but it's very hard to tackle where that money is going unless you can see the live data.
Dennis, at this stage, could I possibly play just that 1 minute YouTube clip for I'll just do a screen share here, everybody. And I can get my technology sorted. So hopefully you will see what comes up. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep, it's very clear, Ben.
Okay, cool. I'll keep going. Does that all sound about right, Dennis?
Well, I couldn't hear it myself, but I've heard it many times. So
Oh, okay, sorry.
to hear it, that's good. Okay, so basically this is an industrial solution that's deployed in schools, and by attaching those little orange devices to different circuits, you can actually measure exactly the power and the cost of each item. And it's a very interesting process to give that data access to students and STEM teachers. And one of the things that really we were interested in was how could we help the teachers by providing them with information that would allow them to create the lesson plans on various topics. So a great example.
Dennis, we seem to have lost your volume. Are you able to sit a bit closer to the microphone?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
It's still a bit soft, I think, for some reason.
I'll have to start shouting.
Sorry, mate.
That's okay. So basically what we tried to do was to provide teachers with information to create lesson plans on various topics. So it was very interesting to hear Suzie talking about the solar. But to actually see solar in action in your school, seeing it live is a key issue. But actually teaching, how do you size it? And so last year we did a very interesting exercise pre-COVID with a school where we taught the students with their STEM teachers, how do you actually size a solar system? How much does it cost? What power does it generate? And what's the return on investment? Because these are crucial life skills. When do you need batteries? When don't you need batteries? How much do they cost? What's the payback period? We then went through a whole series of topics such as reflective window film, reflective roof paints, LED lighting, air conditioning control systems, everything that would empower students to take action in their school where they were getting live data. We realise, of course, that lots of schools don't have much money, as Kate pointed out, they're often small schools. So the great advantage of us working with people like TRAC is that TRAC are quite happy to share their data with schools that can't afford to have their own live data.
Yeah, wow.
And so there's really no reason why any school should be excluded. So some schools will want their own information. Schools that can't afford to have a monitoring system can have access to somebody else's school.
Yeah.
So nationally, we've been choosing schools on a regional basis that would be happy to share. So we've often provided the equipment for nothing to a school, say like TRAC, on the basis that they would share it with other schools. But seeing live information and giving the students access to that live information allows them to do all sorts of interesting studies, experiments. At TRAC, we have installed additional equipment they've got a STEM lab. So for instance, they can measure the individual air conditioning, the certain power points, so they can plug in for experiments to see live how much different pieces of equipment cost. One of the interesting experiments we're going to do is have different temperature settings in 2 identical classrooms, so that it really illustrates to the students the importance of air conditioning being set at the right temperature.
Dennis, can I just ask you, Dennis, I understand that TRAC is a high school, which I know that's changing a bit, but how would all of that content and information go with primary students?
Well, I think we have to come up with a simplified version. So there's a very small school in New South Wales where they're just measuring the air conditioning in some classrooms and using that to illustrate to the students in very simple terms the impact of how much energy is being used. But I actually obviously have no teaching experience, but we ran with Skeggs Redlands a 2-day energy seminar last year, and I was absolutely amazed how quick students picked up. Admittedly, they were Year 9 students, but you can dumb it down, for the younger ones. How quick they picked this stuff up, they were absolutely brilliant. At the end of 2 days, they had to do a presentation to the principal, business manager, and somebody from the board on exactly what should be done in their school, and it was absolutely staggering. Yeah.
Dennis, can you see can you see that's the Word document that I was screen shared there?
Yep.
Yep. So that's the actual program from Skeggs Redlands over 2 days. So I talked to the science teacher there. So I'm sorry to butt in, Dennis. I think I should explain this. This is what you're referring to. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So year 9 was split up into 8 different groups. So it looks like house groups.
Yep.
And they would go through different workshops over a period of, looks like 1.5 days. And then it looks like, one day there, and then the next day is a half day. And then it looks like for the second half of the second day, those students came up with the business proposal. Is that right, Dennis?
Correct. So what they were basically doing was using the knowledge that they'd learned, but most importantly, looking at the financial side of it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you suggest in life, it has to work financially. So it was really interesting for them to look at how does solar work physically, but how does it work financially? There is no point in putting up proposals that, have a 15-year payback period, because it's never going to happen. So it was a really great exercise for them to do. But just to go back to Kate's point, are you actually in Wagga, Kate?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm coming to Wagga next Monday. So it would be good if we caught up, because we might look to do some sort of an experiment and create a junior version of track at your school.
Okay, I'm more than happy to have a chat to my principal. I'm not sure how much free time I have next Monday. It's end of the year with presentation days and all that sort of stuff. But again, we can chat outside this forum if you like, Dennis.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. So basically, the STEM program that we put together is free, because we see it as a sort of social responsibility. So we work with other major companies like 3M, because they work with us to illustrate the benefits of things like reflective window film, stop the transmission of heat through the windows. Dulux provide us with some experimental equipment to measure the effect of reflective roof paints on metal roofs. These are really simple experiments that could be taught at any age group.
Yeah.
So the concept is make it really down to earth and practical, arm the students at whatever age group they are with the knowledge to participate in their school in energy reduction programs. So traditionally, the only people who've worried about these things are the business managers and the property managers. But if you can mobilise all the students to be eco-warriors, if you like, then that's a great thing for the school, but it's also a great thing for the rest of their lives, because these are really simple concepts, but they're just not taught because teachers don't always have access to this information.
That was what I was excited about, Dennis. The skills are transferable. So you mentioned even if a school doesn't have is not in a position to get those solar panels, well, as an adult they might be. And as someone who's trying to buy a house at the moment, I'm doing the mathematics on whether we'll put solar panels on that house. So yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying, and I think it's really interesting that Track is able to share their data. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing as well.
Well, it's the only way really to help the schools that don't have the funds to do it for themselves. If Kate's school didn't have solar, it doesn't actually prevent Kate from teaching solar, because she can look at somebody else's data. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Throwing out questions for Dennis there, if you're happy to go to questions, Dennis.
Yep, for sure.
Great.
Stony silence. I must have done a presentation with no questions to ask.
Well, as I said earlier, Dennis, teachers are largely zoomed out this year, and we don't get a lot of teachers attending the actual recording. But what we do get is a lot of interaction on our email list where we send out the minutes afterwards.
Yes.
So don't view that silence as something that that you're on the right track. I think you're definitely on the right track, and I think possibly you're part of that early adopter curve,
Yeah.
so to speak, where, you know, there's just a certain amount of people that adopt at the start, and then it's sort of, you know, you get the curve. So yeah, no, I think you're on track. I think it's interesting. And as a teacher, if I was teaching in a school, I would be really keen to, from a geography standpoint, so I'm a geography teacher, so I'd be looking at, well, how many gigawatts of solar panels does our school have, and how many tons of carbon dioxide does that remove? And, you know, according to the IPCC, how many tons do we need to remove? And, you know, what percentage of our state's goals does our school achieve? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it'd be a phenomenal result if every school introduced a sustainability policy, wouldn't it?
Mm.
You know, nationally, it'd be massive.
Well,
They're meant to have schools are meant to have a sustainability plan. But I think they just went by the wayside, I think. I don't know. It's something that SEMPS, they were called. SEMPS.
yeah.
Can I just ask a question, Dennis? As you've mentioned, Ben sort of mentioned it, because I was interested to know to what extent doing those sorts of programs opens up the climate change story. That was the first question, and Ben's kind of answered that in a way by making it really explicit how much carbon dioxide you're saving from going into the atmosphere. But you might have another perspective on that. And the second question was, have you, from your experience, have you had a sense of how much it's transferred then into the kids' homes or to teaching parents about this sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting question, because when we started with SCEGS, I wanted to get a feeling of how far, you know, what do these students really know? So we sent out a survey. First question, are you interested in or concerned about climate change? 100%. Have you got air conditioning at home? 90%. What temperature do you set it at? Have no idea. LED lighting. What's LED lighting? And so we went from, yeah, we are really concerned about climate, but we actually know absolutely nothing. And this is why we were so inspired to say, okay, let's give the teachers this information, because the teachers do not have easy access to industry solutions.
Yeah.
So where we've worked with schools for years, going into the school and saying, right, this is what's happening in the school, we then have to say to them, now here are the solutions that you can implement.
Yeah.
There's no point in telling somebody they're sick without telling them what, you know, which doctor to go and see. So basically the bigger schools have been doing this now for some time. But my thing that really used to upset me was that they wouldn't share this information with the teachers, which is ridiculous. Yeah. So we just set about doing it, and it's got easier because of, obviously, STEM has become such a massive topic in schools. It's very hard for them now to say, you can't have this information. But having live data, and apart from telling you the information in energy terms, it's also telling you the energy cost. Because as I said before, cost is the critical deciding factor on most actions. Isn't it brilliant that reducing your energy bill also helps the climate? You know, it's great that these two things work hand in hand. And so
every climate change solution is a solution for something else as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if Ben could distribute a number of things to you, and I'll work out with you, Ben, how we do this.
Yeah, sure.
Certainly the login to track would be really interesting for all interested parties to have a look at. The list of topics that we cover would be interesting for schools to have a look at and ask us, you know, okay, how can we introduce this component or that component? It's quite a long list. They might not want to do all of it. And also very interesting what Kate said, you know, how do we introduce this to junior schools, not just, you know, year 9, 10 students. But also we found a good example was Xavier College in Melbourne, which is obviously a very wealthy school. their Year 12 students did a complete analysis of energy use in their school, even to the point where we gave them access to our technical team in Israel, and they ended up knowing more about our system than I did. You know, that it's amazing what we can do if we open up the opportunity to give people access to information.
Yeah.
So, meeting Ben next week. So maybe we can organise something with Kate. Hopefully I'm meeting Ed for a catch-up. Jenny, where are you based?
I'm in Wagga.
All right, well, maybe we can all catch up at some stage. I'm there for the holiday, so.
I'll put my email on the chat. I'd love to.
Okay, very good. Well, I think we can do some really interesting things together.
Okay.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay, no problem. Look forward to meeting you, hopefully.
So let's say for anyone here and for anyone that might watch this recording at a later date, if you're interested in what Dennis is doing, it sounds like the next step it would be to contact you directly, Dennis, via email. Would that be right?
Yep.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll make sure your email address goes out in the summary of the meeting.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dennis.
Cheers.
All right, Ed, you are next cab off the rank. So if you could maybe mention where you are, what your role is, and yeah, carry on the conversation in light of our main audience for this is really the high school and primary school teachers in our local area.
Thanks, Ben. So my name's Edward Maher. I'm the manager of CSU Green at Charles Sturt University. I have to say, Ben, I was pleased and surprised to see my name listed there as a formal agenda item. So help guide me in any particular direction that you'd like the conversation to go in. So I guess working with that broad topic there, Charles Sturt University, the first certified carbon neutral university. So we were pleased to achieve that status in 2016 and were the first university in Australia to do so. To this day, we're one of two. So University of Tasmania is the second university in Australia to achieve that outcome. Pleased to say that we have collaborated with University of Tasmania to quite an extent and helped them along their way in a number of different areas. And that was really part of our aspirations, I suppose. Whilst the goal to become a carbon neutral university was set some time ago, in fact, before I joined the organisation back in about 2006, 2007, there were some fairly influential academic staff that I think recognised and had enough foresight to see that being an institution for the public good, we had a responsibility both ethically, also I think reputationally to be doing positive things when it comes to mitigating climate change and to be seen as a role model for both our students, our staff and the wider communities in doing positive things. And as an institution that's got access to skills and expertise and generally speaking to reasonable resources, it seemed only appropriate that we were being proactive in reducing our carbon footprint. Further to that, some of you may be aware that Charles Sturt University, it's adopted a traditional Wiradjuri phrase, Yindya Mara Wanangana, which largely wraps up its ethos and reason for being, and that roughly translates to the wisdom of respectfully knowing how to live well in a world worth living in. So, it doesn't take too much imagination to draw quite close alignment with that Wiradjuri phrase and to the broader principles of sustainability. And that aligns with some of the points that Ben was making earlier on about the importance of Indigenous culture and First Nations peoples doing such a tremendous job managing this country for many thousands of years. But jumping back to the carbon neutrality journey, so it's been quite a long road, more than 10 years in fact. So we were chipping away at a lot of the obvious things that you would expect, things like reducing the amount of energy that we used around our organisation, encouraging people to recycle more, trying to change behaviours just around simple things like turning lights off when they don't need them and running air conditioning systems more efficiently. But then there were some more substantial investments in things like engineering solutions to energy efficiency, fairly large scale renewable energy systems, which have been fairly recent developments. We've now got just over 4 megawatts of rooftop solar ticking away across our various campuses. And then things like cogeneration, so using gas to run a turbine to generate heat and power in a way that's somewhat more efficient than grid source power. So there's some examples of things that we've been doing across the campus to reduce our overall carbon footprint. The process of becoming a carbon neutral organisation consists of a few principles. You need to accurately quantify and measure all of the different components that are contributing to your carbon footprint, and there's some international standards and protocols that guide you around that. There's a program in Australia called Climate Active, which converts that into the Australian context, and it's a government-backed program that provides some useful resources as well as access to people within the department that can help you through that process. And ultimately, it also sets a standard. It provides, I guess, an independent check and transparency that the claims that organisations who have become carbon neutral have actually followed a due process. So after that accurate measuring and reporting has occurred, there's obviously, in most instances, there will be still a net amount of emissions despite efforts that you've undertaken to try and reduce your carbon footprint. Typically, there's something left, and that might consist of things like aeroplane flights, not that there's too many of those happening in the current climate, but also waste emissions, so things that are happening off your premises on your behalf. So they're often referred to as scope 3 emissions, which in our case, we've calculated that they account for somewhere between 25 to 30% of our carbon emissions. I should say that electricity and natural gas are by far and away our biggest contributors. So electricity alone accounts for nearly half, around 45% of our total carbon footprint. Gas is around 16 odd %. And then it starts to get into smaller bits and pieces. Livestock, that's another one that's a pretty big contributor. We've got quite a number of cattle and sheep, and they're all pretty gassy, and that leads to methane, which is a pretty intensive greenhouse gas. So yeah, that's what our carbon footprint tends to look like. So in order to become a carbon neutral organisation, we then need to actually invest in something called carbon offsets. And many of you are probably familiar with those, but that is essentially a reduction in emissions that's occurring on our behalf or with our financial support elsewhere. And they can take many shapes and forms. In our case, we've supported projects both locally and overseas that have consisted of things like revegetation of degraded farmland in inland New South Wales. So that's one local project that we've invested in. There's changes in land management practices that are being led by First Nations peoples up around Northern Australia, where they're starting to practice things that were done often thousands of years ago in a wider landscape, and they're tending to undertake cool burns, which have the ability to trap carbon or increase the amount of carbon that's being retained in the soil versus less frequent but much more intensive fires, similar to the style that we had over the last summer, which do result in a huge amount of carbon emissions being released into the atmosphere during those types of events. On an international scale, we've supported projects such as Rimbaraya, which is a big private, essentially a park that assists with preservation of orangutans in Borneo, but it also provides a number of other co-benefits, such as providing employment opportunities for people in those communities as well. I think education of females and employment in females is a big benefit of that program as well. And then there's some other projects like conversion of wood fuel stoves in some regional areas of India to local biodigesters, so that they collect manure from the stock that they're raising in that area, and that goes into a fairly low-tech but effective biodigestion system, which is then plumbed and used to produce natural gas to burn as a fuel and light source within their regional community. So yeah, as I said, they're projects that are occurring with our financial support to achieve immediate benefits and to negate carbon emissions that are being produced elsewhere on our behalf or with our financial assistance. And carbon offsets is an area that sometimes does draw some criticism and skepticism, but there are only a handful of accredited programs that will be accepted under the Australian government's Climate Active program that I mentioned before. So they need to be really robust. They need to demonstrate things like that they're additional emission reductions that wouldn't have otherwise occurred without the creation of the offset. They need to be permanent and measurable, and they need to be transparent and independently audited. So there's a lot of effort that goes into making sure those systems are strong and sound and achieving real results around the world. Ben, I'll pause there for a moment.
Yeah.
Any particular questions or things that you'd like me to go into in a bit more detail?
There are, but I think you've given a really, really good, you've got to the guts and the heart of what we needed to get to really quickly. But first of all, I'll throw an opportunity for other people, and then I've got two questions. So if anyone else has got a question for Ed there. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'll go. So Ed, two questions. First one, for local school teachers, are there opportunities for field trips to CSU?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. We've done that in the past. We've had visits from more than one school here. We've buddied up in a fairly informal kind of mentor program with another local high school. So yes, more than happy for people to reach out and for us to arrange something.
If I want to bring my class over or actually if I just want to have a conversation with you about what you've done at CSU and how that could be relevant to my classroom, how would I get in contact with you?
Email's probably a good way to start.
Cool.
Yep. So if you look at I can share that after this.
Yeah.
That can go out as part of your materials.
Yeah,
yep.
Cool. And second one, in terms of carbon neutrality, what was harder? So I've had the analogy that you've got a bucket, and if there's a crack in the bucket or a hole in the bucket, there's no use trying to keep filling the bucket up with water. So I guess how that translates to me in terms of energy efficiency is that if you've left a window open, there's no use there's no use sort of having solar panels with your air conditioner because you're constantly leaking out that, I don't know, goodness or whatever out the window. So
resource.
Yeah. So in terms of you achieving carbon neutrality, was it more challenging to put the solar panels on, or was it more challenging to say, get people to turn off the lights or just reduce the amount of energy in the first place?
I'd have to admit that solar panels were one of the easiest parts of the whole program. They're an engineering solution that typically have a pretty good business case, and then you just go through the process of procurement and project management and all the rest of it. Quite often it's the projects that involve behavior change that are the most challenging when you're trying to appeal to hundreds, if not thousands of individuals that have very busy lives and certain areas of interest and certain areas that they're not tuning into. They're probably personally the programs that I find the most challenging. And I suggest that I'm probably not alone in that. Quite often it's the engineering style projects that can be easier and quicker to implement. I think that's my advice, that there is no silver bullet. I think trying to have a purist approach of eliminating as much energy as you can use before you start investing in alternative sources, before you start looking at carbon offsets. I would suggest that consider all of those options as being viable and worthwhile. Work it to your advantages. Certain organizations will have certain interests in certain areas. They might get better promotional or engagement benefits from doing one particular program over the other. You might have a really receptive group of stakeholders, in which case the behaviour change program is easier and more straightforward.
Yeah.
And in the case of a school, you know, and thinking back to some of the work of Craig Rucastle in the ABC series and the seemingly amazing results and interest that they had from the school groups. Obviously, having a national TV program is probably a pretty good incentive for getting the kids interested. But you know, that seemed to just have remarkable results, and that was demonstrated over many months of a program that they ran at multiple schools. So I think it's horses for courses, and look at all the different case studies and different examples of what's been done before, and I think shake it up and tune it to suit your particular application, and like the interests and momentum that you've got in the organisation at that time.
Ed, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you have anything to do with the teaching undergraduates that are at the university? Because obviously sustainability is one of the cross-curricular priorities, and I guess what I'm asking is, do your organisation within it, the CSU Green, do they speak with the teachers there?
Not a huge amount directly, Danielle. So we're probably more behind the scenes and more agitating for the kinds of support mechanisms and resources that are available to academic staff and educational designers to make sure that they're doing a good job of incorporating sustainability into curriculum. It does happen, but it's fairly small scale and ad hoc, the amount of, say, direct presentations or projects or assessment tasks that we're working with our undergrads in.
Yep, no worries, thanks.
But pleasingly, there is more and more activity happening in that area all the time through their mainstream learning activities. And like you say, it is an organisational commitment that's been made to make sure that all undergrads are exposed to sustainable practices as part of their studies.
Yeah, thanks.
Ed, can I make a quick comment on something there? You mentioned that behavioural change was the harder part of what you were saying. I think as a teacher, for me, with my own class, it'd almost be the opposite, that I would have absolutely no control over whether my school gets solar panels, but I do have control. It's far more accessible for me to talk about behaviour change with my students. And I think, so last year I was involved in a project in conjunction with Wagga Council, where we went and found out what teachers thought meaningful environmental education looked like. And it took us 8 months to develop a workbook for Year 9 geography students, where they would look at their own behaviours and measure them using the concept of ecological footprint. And there's a website with the calculator. So I think even if teachers, you know, can't, it's really hard with all the red tape, and maybe your principal's not that way inclined, or there's other priorities for the school. Teachers are still, high school teachers can still get in touch with us here at Air and Earth and ask for starting points with where to start with behavioural change. And we've got a resource ready to go. But also primary school teachers can still get in touch with us here at Air and Earth and say, what would work in my school? And then we would be really happy to work with any primary schools that want to take that first step.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I'd definitely agree, Ben.
Cool. Well, I think that takes us to the end of the sort of formal things I had on the agenda, and it exactly took us an hour. I feel like we're breaking new ground here. I feel like we're pushing ahead, and you know, it's not easy for all teachers to attend all meetings at the same time and be up with everything, but I think we're sort of, you know, making good headway, so that, you know, 1 or 2 teachers might have a look at what we're doing and say that could work for me, and then, you know, 3 or 4 teachers might see what those 1 or 2 teachers are doing, and hopefully the change comes like that. So what have I missed, everyone? Anything? Good.
Done a good job, Ben.
Okay,
Good job.
cool. Okay, good on us. And I hope, yeah, look, teachers in Wagga, you've had teachers all over the world probably have had an amazing year, a challenging year. So congratulations to Danielle and Kate for number 1, surviving. You still have all your hair, you haven't ripped it out.
Got
yeah.
fresh glitter in it though, Ben.
And yeah, hopefully for you and for other teachers in Wagga, if you found anything in this recording interesting, please get in touch with us here at Air and Earth or with any of the other email addresses that we will include. And even little questions, like if we've used words that perhaps we're all saying, yeah, no worries, we get it. And then we move on, and then other teachers haven't crossed those words before. We are really approachable in really breaking it down, listening to where your situation is at your school, helping you understand what the next realistic, meaningful step is for you. That's the most important thing I think we can do for teachers in our area.
Thanks, Ben.
Other than that, I think we're done. Please have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks,
Good job.
Ed.
Okay,
Bye.
I'll see you all next time.
Bye.
That was
Yes.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.